$50 million vanished into the English night, leaving behind a massive historical mystery. But the most shocking part of the Great Train Robbery isn't how they did it. It is the chilling fact that someone walked away clean and kept the fortune. August 8, 1963, at precisely 3:03 in the morning, a Glasgow to London mail train rolled. It moved through the dark Buckinghamshire countryside, entirely unaware of the nightmare waiting ahead. Locked inside 120 ordinary mailbags sat millions in untraceable used banknotes. Almost nobody outside a very small circle of postal workers even knew it was there. But someone did know, and they had been planning this exact moment for over a year. The driver, Jack Mills, hit a red signal at the quiet Bridego railway bridge. He brought the heavy train to a complete stop, unaware of the lurking shadows. 15 men were already crouching silently along the dark embankment, waiting to strike fast. Within seconds, they swarmed the locomotive, executing the most audacious robbery in British history. To understand how 15 men pulled off the impossible, you must understand one man. Bruce Reynolds was a ghost, a charming, cultured career thief who had never been caught. He wore tailored suits, read deep philosophy, and drove incredibly fast Aston Martin cars. Reynolds believed that the perfect crime truly deserved the absolute perfect level of planning. He spent months carefully assembling his loyal crew, choosing each man for a specific skill. Gordon Goody was ice cold. Charlie Wilson could move stolen money without leaving a single trace. But the brilliant plan had one critical requirement that could ruin absolutely everything tonight. They desperately needed someone who actually knew how to drive the massive mail train. They found a retired, reliable railway driver they called Pop, the final missing piece. But Reynolds didn't know that the train running the route was a newer model. It was a different locomotive, one that Pop had never operated in his entire life. That single terrifying detail would haunt the robbers for the rest of their lives. When the signal turned red and the train stopped, the gang moved with military efficiency. One small team quickly ran to intercept the 57-year-old train driver, Jack Mills. Mills saw them coming through the darkness, but he had absolutely no time to react. A gang member violently hit him with a kosh, a heavy, leather-wrapped, brutal weapon. Badly injured and bleeding down his face, Mills was ruthlessly dragged from the train cab. Then a desperate decision was made, because Pop, their expert driver, completely froze up. The locomotive was wrong, and he couldn't move it down the embankment to the trucks, so a severely beaten, half-conscious Jack Mills was forced to drive the train himself. That cruel choice was the dark moral stain that forever followed the Great Train Robbers. 120 heavy mailbags, weighing over 2.5 massive tons. They were passed hand to hand down a human chain in just 15 frantic minutes. Over £2.5 million in used notes vanished into the English night. By the time the police finally reached the scene, the men were already miles away. Newspapers instantly called it the crime of the century. Scotland Yard declared an emergency. The gang successfully escaped to Leatherslade Farm, an isolated hideout 27 miles away. It was perfect in theory, remote, quiet, with absolutely no neighbors for miles around. The original plan was to stay hidden for a week, then scatter across Europe safely. But the police were moving much faster than anyone in the criminal underworld expected. It became the largest investigation in British history, with roadblocks and military army helicopters. Hundreds of officers were aggressively combing the countryside, forcing Reynolds to make a desperate call. They needed to leave the farmhouse much earlier than planned to avoid getting caught. The major problem was, in their rush to escape, they left something devastating behind. Fingerprints. Not on some obscure surface, but clearly left on a simple Monopoly board. While hiding out, the gang had played the game using bundles of real stolen cash. When police finally raided Leatherslade Farm on August 13th, just 5 days after the robbery, forensics pulled crystal-clear prints from the board, from cups, and from surfaces everywhere. The men who had planned the perfect crime had relaxed inside their own evidence. The arrests came incredibly fast. Gordon Goody, Charlie Wilson, Roy James, and Buster Edwards. Edwards went on the run, but eventually surrendered, completely unable to bear the intense pressure. 13 of the 15 gang members were eventually caught, and the heavy sentences came down. 25 years, 24 years. The judge angrily called the robbery a wave of extreme lawlessness. The prison sentences were shockingly longer than those handed down to actual cold-blooded killers. Britain was sending a massive message to the public. No one gets away with this. But the truth is, someone actually did get away and became a global legend. On July 8, 1965, Ronnie Biggs scaled the wall of Wandsworth Prison with a rope ladder. He dropped into a waiting van, completely disappearing into Europe, Australia, and finally Brazil. British law could not touch him there because he fathered a child with a Brazilian woman. For 30 decades, Biggs lived openly in Rio de Janeiro, giving interviews and television appearances. He bizarrely became a major tourist attraction, acting as a living symbol of romanticized crime. The world was fascinated, which made the police furious and left the surviving victims sick. Jack Mills, the violently beaten driver, never fully recovered from the trauma of that night. He died in 1970, just 7 years after the robbery, at 64 years old. Despite the massive stolen fortune, he tragically never received a single penny of compensation. Bruce Reynolds was finally caught in 1968, hiding out quietly under a false name. He served 10 years in prison. When he was released, all the money was gone. The fast cars, the tailored suits, the expensive gallery openings, absolutely all of it vanished. Of the money stolen, only £400,000 was ever fully recovered. The overwhelming majority of the massive cash fortune simply vanished and has never been found, which raises a dark and disturbing question that has never been fully answered by police. 15 men committed the crime. Most of them were caught and imprisoned within months. So where did the missing millions actually go? And who was secretly holding the cash? Who walked away completely clean while everyone else suffered the harsh consequences of the law? Some investigators deeply believed there was actually a mysterious 16th man involved in the plot, someone who never came anywhere near the farm and whose name never appeared in files. Someone who quietly collected his share and went straight back to his perfectly ordinary life. While his crime partners spent decades rotting in prison, he enjoyed a massive stolen fortune. We still don't know who that mysterious person actually is, and we may never know. And perhaps that is the most heartbreaking and final truth of the Great Train Robbery. It isn't about the glamour, the absolute audacity, or the brilliant prison escapes to Brazil. The final truth is that the people who paid the highest price were innocent victims. Jack Mills violently lost his health, and the gang members permanently lost their freedom. Innocent families tragically lost their husbands, their loving fathers, and their young sons to prison. And somewhere out there, someone who risked absolutely nothing and planned absolutely nothing that dark night is sitting on an untraceable massive fortune, a stolen fortune of millions that only belongs to them in any way. It was called the absolute crime of the century, executed with flawless and military precision. But looking back at the dark history, nobody even knows if true justice was ever served.